Hi, everyone. We're going to give it about 30 seconds as the room is filling up, and then we'll get started.
Please silence your phones, everybody.
I'm just getting an email from someone that they can't hear me. I mean, a text is
I can hear you over here.
great. Okay, great. All right, are we ready to kick it off? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the SOAR-D1 Candidate Forum on the topic of homelessness. My co-host and co-moderator this evening is SOAR member Ryan Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, Ryan, if you'll give a little wave. Thank you for respecting our postponement of this discussion. And out of respect for the brutal killing of George Floyd and our national anguish, I invite everyone to pause for a moment of silence. Thank you. Our discussion tonight is focused on homelessness in D1. This issue is top of mind for our members who want to see our unhoused neighbors treated with compassion and the help they might need to lead meaningful lives, as well as respect and work with the neighborhood as a whole. This is a tough issue, and we do not pretend to know all the answers, but we are invested in learning, innovating, and working with our city government to alleviate this crisis. Most of the SOAR founding members have volunteered extensively with homeless services, and one of our co-founders, Ward Naughton, has personally expended 2.5 years studying the issue, meeting with a huge number of unhoused neighbors in the Richmond district, and trying to engage city leaders in creative solutions. In under a decade, the annual spend on direct homeless services in San Francisco as a whole has gone from $157 million to $364 million, and the number of homeless keeps rising. So something is not working. We need leadership and creativity from our next supervisor. The discussion tonight is rooted in almost 100 questions that we received from D1 residents. It was hard work culling them down, but we tried to hit on most of the general themes in the questions. And now, Ward will frame tonight's discussion with a short presentation on the state of homelessness in District 1.
Facing District 1. The topic for this evening is homelessness in the Richmond. Like San Francisco at large, District 1 has experienced a significant rise in its homeless population. Whereas the city's homeless population has increased 20% since 2015, District 1 has seen a 130% increase over the same period, and it's continuing to grow. Today, it is estimated that there are over 200 individuals living on the streets in the Richmond. Importantly, the composition of the homeless population in the district is also changing. Individuals with severe drug afflictions has increased from 21% of surveyed individuals to more than 46% of the larger number. When you combine drugs and alcohol, the percentage is closer to 80%. What is interesting is the city reports that combined, these numbers are only 18% citywide. Something is clearly amiss. Could the growth we see be partly coming from efforts to address the issues downtown, most specifically the Tenderloin? It is unclear. The Stanton McDonald's case perhaps sheds some light on this important question. The city also states that 67% of the homeless population were former residents of San Francisco. When you look at the Richmond, this number is closer to 5 or 10%. Clearly, the majority of homeless people in the Richmond were not original residents who lost their housing. The hotspots include Geary Boulevard, in particular 18th Avenue, Park Presidio Boulevard, La Playa near Safeway, and also the Fulton Golden Gate Park corridor. In terms of success stories, the most relevant one is Nadine Wong, who was an elderly Asian woman who was placed in conservatorship by the city and is now living a hopefully healthier existence. Our failures are too many to count, from the individual throwing colostomy bags to drug dealing and fights on 18th Avenue to the known individuals going into Walgreens and openly stealing. When it comes to homelessness, District 1 residents speak as much with their actions as with their words. A number of our members work in the medical and public health sectors, working with homeless individuals. Many have also had friends and family members caught up in the debilitating spiral of alcohol and drug abuse. They care about helping others, particularly those who appreciate the value of such assistance. 2 years ago, a group of Richmond District neighbors came together to better understand the details when it comes to homelessness in the Richmond. This group worked closely with the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, the homeless outreach teams, the Department of Public Health, Project Homeless Connect, and other departments. This group also conducted its own counts of the homeless population in the Richmond and interviewed numerous individuals in the district. As importantly, our members have also volunteered at shelters and with organizations providing services to this population. When it comes to potential approaches for addressing homelessness, there's clearly a wide range of options. Some of these are listed here. This is not meant to be an all-encompassing list. It is understood by our group that the Richmond homeless population is different from the situation downtown. And second, that there is not a single solution to the challenge. However, it is strongly believed that specific, measurable progress can and must be made in the district. Breaking the problem into smaller pieces is a way to start this process. For example, focusing on the 10 to 20 most visible cases in the Richmond. District 1 residents are willing to work in a positive, problem-solving manner and will roll up our sleeves to help. However, there are a number of current conditions that our group finds unacceptable. For example, open drug use and discarding of used needles, public disorderliness, public urination and defecation, theft and property crimes, and harassment of residents, particularly our elderly and female neighbors. We trust you will address these conditions in your responses tonight. With that, let me now turn it back to Marie.
Thank you so much, Ward. And I'm actually turning it over to Ryan.
Thank you, Marie. Great presentation. Tonight, this is the ground rules. Each candidate will have an opening 30-second statement, followed by the question and answer period. During the question and answer portion, each candidate will ask the same question. The moderators may ask follow-up questions to a candidate. Please note that every candidate may not be asked a follow-up question. Towards the end of the panel discussion, the candidates will have an opportunity to ask another candidate a question. The last portion of tonight's discussion, the moderators will ask a series of questions where the response will be a simple yes or no. Every candidate will be given the opportunity for a 30-second closing statement. Right now, I'd like to invite the candidates to give a 30-second introduction. We've done this today in alphabetical order by first name. So Amanda Inocencio, please.
Hi, thank you. I'm Amanda Inocencio. I'm running for District 1 Supervisor. In my decades-long residency in San Francisco, I've been an advocate and activist and a civil rights and defense lawyer addressing issues involving immigration, tenants' rights, criminal justice reform, LGBTQ employment law, poverty, education, children, and the environment. As a District 1 supervisor, I will work earnestly on practical solutions on matters around conflict, disrepair, and the need of building that are an urgent need before us. And I thank you in advance for your consideration. I really appreciate being here tonight.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And I hope you don't mind me calling you by your first names this evening.
That's fine, thank you.
Yeah, the next is Connie Chan. You have 30.
Sorry. Good evening. My name is Connie Chan. It's an honor to be running as your District 1 supervisor. I came here when I was 13 years old, first generation immigrant. My mom still lived in the same rent control apartment that I grew up in Chinatown. My partner, who's a firefighter in the city, he and I, we, with our family's help, that we're able to have our own home in the Richmond and raising our first grader, our son, who's a first grader at elementary, Lafayette Elementary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie. Our next candidate is Marjan Philhauer. Marjan, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
You would have thought we've done enough of these. Okay. Hi, I'm Marjan Philhauer. I also am running for District 1 supervisor. And I was born here in the Richmond. My parents immigrated here in 1968 and met at San Francisco State. And now my husband Byron and I are raising our 3 kids here. We have a rising 2nd grader, 8th grader, and 5th grader. School just ended. So I also run a family business with my sister on Balboa Street, and very excited to be here to talk about this critical issue. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marjan. Next is Sherman De Silva.
Hi, I'm Sherman De Silva, and born and lived in the Richmond district. Went to Sutro, Presidio, and Washington High School. I currently work in the district, in the Central Richmond district, and I want to focus on getting back on the main things that we see when we get out of our home, making sure the streets are clean and making sure those things we see every day are taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherman. And our last, we saved the best for last, is Veronica Senzato.
Thank you very much to SOAR-D1 again for putting this together. So my name is Veronica Shinzato, and I'm also running for D1. I'm a longtime resident of the Richmond district, went to Alamo Presidio, Washington. I currently have a 4th grader at Lafayette and a graduate from George Washington High School who's now at City College. If it wasn't for the fact we were at COVID-19, he'd be playing football right now. So he's a defensive tackle there and plays baseball. So a proud mom of, a City College student here. Running for D1, I'm also a small business owner with 20 years of public experience, both at the local and state government level. I'm really looking forward to talking about our issues today.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Now I'll turn it over to Marie.
Hi, everybody. I've got our first question. For this question, you will have 1.5 minutes to share your vision with a potential for a 30-second follow-up. There are approximately 87 homeless in San Francisco right now, and approximately 200 living in D1 as of 2017. We're not sure with COVID exactly how many there are now. What are your specific ideas and solutions regarding the homeless population in the Richmond district? And we'll start with Connie.
Thank you. Homelessness is a symptom of a systemic problem, and that problem is the lack of equity, the lack of equitable access to healthcare, housing, and job and food security for many generations of working people. So again, I think Ward has mentioned it too, the city's homeless count and survey in 2019, a majority of homeless individuals were tenants in our city before they lost housing. And I trust that stats. And so that with that, also believe the best way to solve the problem of homelessness is to prevent it from happening to begin with by making sure that we help tenants to stay in their homes with housing assistance and help keep their jobs with job training. That really means is to fully fund free legal counsel for tenants. We do more to provide equitable access to general health care, mental health services, and addiction treatment. Also, let's build a pathway to bring homeless San Franciscans into SROs and long-term supportive housing, and for SROs residents to obtain permanent workforce and affordable housing. And this is what I believe that what we need to do to provide and to have coordinated cities' efforts around job training, education with City College, provide meals, social services supported by federal and state funding. And that's how we can help them and solve the homelessness problem.
Thank you, Connie. Marjan, you're next.
So there's a reason I think we've all come together and why homelessness is the first issue that SOAR is addressing. And I think we've seen in several community conversations, homelessness is the #1 issue of concern for so many residents. While yes, I agree, there are many individuals who are experiencing homelessness who used to have shelter and who used to be housed. There's also the issue that we can't ignore around mental illness, around substance use and drug addiction, and around jobs. So I think when looking at this issue and looking at the fact that this didn't happen overnight here in San Francisco, this has been going on for over 30 years. And the times when we have meaningful conversations in our neighborhood around it are usually in election year. And because this is so important to all of us, it's a daily, it's an issue that we need to make progress on daily with metrics. And that means housing first, ensuring that people have the accessibility to having a roof over their head and a bed to sleep in. It means treating mental illness and substance use as the diseases that they are. As I've mentioned before, when someone has dementia, we treat that disease, we treat that illness. And we've seen nationwide, the opioid crisis is something that San Francisco is not excluded from. And then lastly, but definitely not least, as we move individuals into shelter beds and permanent supportive housing and then independent housing, we need to ensure that they have the means to really support themselves through jobs training.
Thank you. Sherman, you're up next.
Yeah, so when I talk to people who are out on the street and trying to get them into the system, the #1 concern that they have is that the shelter is not safe. I've heard that from multiple people when you try to get them to go to the shelter. So I think our first priority is to get the people off the street. And I think we have to have a safe place for them to go. And I think right now, we need something that's really simple and can get people off the street and into some kind of shelter where we can try to figure out what issues that they need to deal with, whether it's mental assistance or drug addiction. So I think we need to have a place where they can go. My recommendation is we've got a whole bunch of city garages right now. Tourism's down and they're empty. So let's put up some partitions in all of those city garages and make sure each one has a place to go. And while they're there, let's have all our services in one place so that we can start addressing each of these people's afflictions, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or mental issue. At least we have them at one location and we can consolidate all of our resources to help all the people there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherman. And Veronica, you're up next.
So we have a moral leadership responsibility to address our city's homelessness epidemic. I think District 1, we have about over 260 unhoused population, of which 64 are under the age of 25, which means we have to do better when it comes to our foster care children who leave the system. We can't just at 21 give them a check and wish them good luck. You cannot be a San Francisco Unified School District. We should not allow a San Francisco Unified School District student to be unhoused. We have to do better for our working families. Now, homelessness, if we want to make a dent in solving our unhoused population, I think we must take a multi-dimensional approach, one individual at a time. I think my fellow candidates have brought it up. One approach does not solve all the issues. Homelessness comes in different forms and matters. But I also believe we need to advocate with our state legislators and our federal legislators and agencies, because this is not a San Francisco issue. This is a national crisis. And if we want San Francisco to be a model, we will be, but we need help. We cannot do this alone. So I ask for federal agencies and elected officials and at the state level, we need your assistance to help fund San Francisco, specifically our affordable transitional housing programs. I think that's where we can start making a dent, especially for our unhoused families here in the outer Richmond and inner Richmond district.
Thank you, Veronica. And Amanda.
Thank you. I want to cite something from the Pitt report. The life expectancy of chronically homeless person is 36 years less than someone in the general population due to them suffering from health conditions, including substance abuse, mental health, PTSD, chronic health conditions, physical disabilities, traumatic brain injuries, AIDS, and HIV. Our homeless are families, veterans, jobless, and the impoverished, and those recently released from incarceration, 15%. Although Blacks and African Americans make up 5% of our city, they make up 30% of our homeless. Stability helps, but we are not getting there. In response, we as a city are building multi-million-dollar tents called navigation centers that provide a temporary group living, and for some this feels unsafe. The wait list currently is over 1,000 people. Our general hospital emergency psych is overwhelmed and overworked and turn away 30% of the ambulances that pull up to go to other care facilities. I'm going to skip over some other ideas. My vision is bold, clear, unified, collaborative, and data-driven. I want a variety of different options for people to go into. I want the LPS law amended. 5450 was rewritten and it's not working. We need rehabilitation offsite. We need to revamp the Homeward Bound program, and we need supportive housing.
Thank you, Amanda. Ryan, do you have any follow-up questions for our candidates on that question?
I do. Sherman, in your presentation, you mentioned that we might want to use our city-owned garages and facilities to house temporarily our homeless population. Post that, what's the next step?
Well, I think once we have all these people with a place that they can go, so they're not out in the elements on the street or trying to get food, then we can start focusing on the other issues. We can make sure that they get food every day, get them into the health system, get them treatment if they need treatment. But we need to know what their issues are, and we can't address those issues while they're out on the street. We need to have them in a place where we can address those issues.
Thank you very much. And Marjan, and in your presentation, you spoke about housing first, accessibility, and a way to treat them in a mental illness. How do you go about doing that?
So I think there are a couple things. I mean, we talk a lot about the $300 million that's being spent on homelessness services, and that's in a multi-billion-dollar city budget. So I'm all for auditing and making those contracts more transparent so we can figure out how to make those systems more effective. But I also think we need to look at how we can treat these issues, right? So for example, sobering centers. Sobering center on 180 Jones was supposed to be open, but then due to COVID, it's now being used as a safe camping site, right? So I think we need to see oh, my time is up.
No, thank you very much. And Amanda, I have a question for you. What about the specific population in the Richmond district? In your presentation, you spoke about homeless people abroad citywide. We want to focus on the issue of the Richmond district. What are you going to do? And please be detailed in your response for us in this district.
Okay, so I just want clarification on that question if I can not have my time used up. Are you saying that the people specifically in this district have a different profile than the general profile in the city in that question?
No, this is not a question of profiles. Today we're focusing on District 1 issues, not citywide issues. And so if you were elected today, how would you solve the problem of the homeless people in District 1?
Well, first of all, I'd get a profile on who's in District 1 that's homeless, and I think Ward kind of spelled some of that out. We have a hot team, and the hot team takes numbers, and we also have a database now that's gone into effect. I believe it's in effect now, called the One database, and it tracks the people's profiles, and then we need to track each one of those individuals into the proper forum that will give them the support and the get out of homelessness that they need.
Great, thank you very much. And no further follow-up questions. Now I'll move on to question number 2. As noted in the board's presentation, we know firsthand that a high percentage of our homeless in the Richmond are drug or alcohol addicted. A fair number have been offered housing and have refused it. How would you propose addressing the substance abuse, mental illness, and other issues that affect this population? I'd like to start off with Marjan.
So we really need to utilize our conservatorship program because individuals who are addicted to substances and experiencing mental illness sometimes can't help themselves. So there was an article in the paper recently where you know, these cases for conservatorships have not been taken up, right? So there is a problem in our system. I think that, you know, when individuals are substance users and mentally ill, they must be treated with compassion. At the same time, we need to take care of them because they're our neighbors too, right? And that means conserving them and getting them the help that they need.
Thank you. Marie? You're on mute.
Me?
Yes.
Um,
Any other follow-up questions?
Actually, going back to question 1, I don't have a follow-up on this one yet. But going back to question 1, I would just ask Connie, what about substance abuse and drug addiction as some of the drivers where homeless individuals decline offers of housing? How do you work with them?
You know, I think that actually goes back to the questions really about our mental health services and behavioral health services in our current system, and that it requires a reform. It has been an ongoing conversation about how do we reform the current services that we're providing. And, you know, also the approach too. Reality is the city consistently been approaching the homeless issue is really about homeless sweep. And, you know, we know that the law enforcement is first on scene for the most part. And that means we need to reform, have healthcare professional, mental health, social workers, and reform a professional team to do these individualized outreach.
Marie, mute.
Thank you. Ryan, are you going to continue?
Connie, please. To the second question, Connie.
Sorry, the second question is, my apology.
Okay, I'm sorry. We'll go back. As noted in Ward's presentation, we know that firsthand that a high percentage of homeless in Richmond are drug or alcohol addicted. A fair number have been offered housing and have refused it. How would you propose addressing the substance abuse, mental illness, and other issues that affect this population?
I think I kind of answered that when Marie as a follow-up question. You know, again, we know that the city's approach has been homeless sweep and sending out law enforcement. And what we really like to see and should see is the reform of our mental health care services that is going to be offered in a way that is individualized, and to make sure that we have a team of professional, mental health professional, social worker, and community outreach team to really offer individualized services and approach for these individuals to offer them the services and the housing options that they need.
Thank you. Same question goes to Amanda.
One of the things that when someone refuses help, that basically is their constitutional right. You can't force people into help. But what we can do is we can 5150 someone who appears unable to care for themselves in the moment. And we can track that information. And what's really important if we're going to utilize the 5450 statute is that the information has to be connected between the hospitals that take that person in, so we can track that person as opposed to one time being brought in versus the 6 times at 6 different hospitals, because they're not all landing at General now.
Thank you. Same question to Veronica.
So my approach, you know, it's especially in D1 with our unhoused population, it's a trust issue. We have to earn their trust. We have to earn the trust of that particular population. And the way I'm addressing is we have to bring the resources to D1. And my approach would be to bring a mobile navigation center to really figure out what are the services these individual needs are and bring them to them, since they do not want to go to a shelter. They do not want to go to a traditional navigation center. bring the services to them, bring those resources into D1 to serve our unhoused population.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Next question goes, same question goes to Sherman.
So as somebody who's on the ground, and I see this like every week, I hate to say it, but some of these individuals, they don't want help. They don't think they need any help. However, I don't think if they were not intoxicated or if they weren't on drugs, I don't think they would be saying, hey, you know what, let me out there, you know what, I don't need any help. They say they don't need any help because they're intoxicated or they're on drugs. And in my opinion, you know what, that's not compassionate. I think we need to get them into the system if you have to get them in the system, not to put them in jail, but to at least track them and so that we can give them the services that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question goes to Marjan. Last to Marjan.
Did I answer this question?
Oh, you started off, so excuse
Yeah.
me. Thank you very much.
I'm gonna answer it again.
Thank you very much.
We've got all the time in the
that,
world, so
or
we
I-
just want to have you answer over and over again.
I know. Okay.
It was such an eloquent response and answer. I wanted to hear it again, so thank you. Marie, any follow-up questions to the candidates?
I guess the only one I would have right now is, Connie, I know you did sort of answer this question twice actually, but I'm still not, and I'm getting questions. You know, how do you get people to utilize these services? You know, if they're refusing to go to a shelter, if they're refusing other things, how are you getting someone who is drug addicted to actually enter a program? And there are a lot of anecdotal reports. There's a great podcast by Heather Knight at the end of last year where, you know, someone will be, you know, kind of on a downward spiral of taking drugs. It kind of, you know, they get out of their family life, they end up on the street, and, you know, the only thing they care about is their next fix, their next hit. And it really requires someone, either one person really taking a hold of them, or, you know, how do you, if you can't use some sort of law enforcement as a lever there, how do you get someone to enter these kind of services when they refuse to stay in a shelter and they don't want to end their drug or alcohol addiction?
Yeah, I think what, Marie, that you're trying to hit on is conservatorship. You know, that is I am going to just kind of say that out loud for everyone here. You know, the question is really about conservatorship and what we think about it, or what I think about it. The reality is conservatorship law, as known as Laura's Law, has been on the books for a long time. And from my experience working at the district attorney's office, you know, it's been around. The challenge is, the issue really is about the implementation, right? And it's, again, it is about who's in charge, how are these being enforced, and it's really going to be law enforcement. And as we can see right now, you know, that is not the most ideal situation at all. In fact, it could be lethal. So.
Thank you. Ryan, should I move on to question number 3?
Yeah, question number 3, please, Marie.
So we'll be starting with Sherman this time. Please give one specific example of an idea that has worked in other cities or neighborhoods that could work to reduce homelessness in the Richmond district.
Well, I think in order to reduce homelessness, we need to find out what the issues are with each individual. Homelessness is, like we've discussed before, it's not a word that can encompass everybody. Everybody's got different issues, so we need to be able to ascertain what each person's issue is and how to deal with that particular issue that they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Veronica.
You know, I think San Francisco has really shown the rest of the country what we can do when it comes to homelessness. You know, in 2015, with the navigation center being passed and being implemented, it really shows the San Franciscan in us, how we want to really serve our unhoused population. But I think there needs to be a lot of education involved also to our general public and ourselves. One of it is using 311 as the call to assist our unhoused population, not calling 911. So it really comes back to, like, how do we educate us as residents to help our unhoused population, and how do we really approach our unhoused population, as the question before, who have mental illness, who might not be ready to accept services, who might not be ready to go into affordable housing or permanent housing. How do we get there? And I go back to trust.
Thank you. Next up, Amanda.
So Libby Schaff over in Oakland did the Tuft housing. It seems to be working. They lay down the prefab housing. They set up hygiene and sanitation areas. They rope it off so people have an entrance and an exit. They're rule bound. They must be obedient to that if they want to stay there. People are enjoying staying there. It's better than where they were before. We need to look at Vancouver and Japan, who are also doing some min housing. Those are some really good opportunities. And then Rebecca Kaplan in Oakland suggested a cruise ship. I think that that's also an opportunity for us to get some folks housed and up and going. Those ideas seem to be working.
Thank you, Amanda. Connie, you are up next.
Kind of have talked about the best solution to solve homelessness is to prevent it from happening at the first place. And that means it's really helping our people to make sure that they can be housed. And if they lose their job, we find ways to help them to retool their skills and that they can land on their feet again. So that's really where I can see what we really need to invest in. And meanwhile, we do continue to invest in supportive housing and permanent workforce and affordable housing to build a pathway for folks to be housed from being unhoused all the way to be able to land back on their feet and permanently housed.
Thank you. Marjan.
So I agree. We need to diversify our services and also ensure that people do not become unhoused in the first place. But we also have thousands of individuals experiencing homelessness right now in San Francisco, and we're not going to enforce our way out of this issue. I think when you talk about cities that have been successful, look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? People need to feel safe. We need to look at the humanity behind this, and they need housing. So Salt Lake City has had a good housing program, right? I've read somewhere some countries in Europe like Finland has. But really here in San Francisco, there are individuals living in shelter, working 2 or 3 jobs, who with that $15 an hour job would not be able to afford housing in San Francisco, and they may not luck out with the affordable housing lottery either. So we need to provide housing.
Thank you. Ryan, do you have any follow-up questions related to this question?
I do. Thank you very much, Marie. My first question goes to Veronica. Veronica, Project Homeless Connect already operates mobile services in the district for treatment of alcohol and drug treatment services. How frequently should these services be available in the Richmond, and who specifically should be accountable for those services?
I think, I'm glad you bring it up, because I've actually walked the district and asked how many times a week these services are provided, and I really don't get an answer when it comes to D1. So when you ask me how much should they be here to really address this issue, they need to be here at least once a week, not once a month. These individuals need services every day. Now, is it feasible to be here every day? I'll leave that up to what our budget says, but they need to be here more often than they're already at.
And then who's accountable for that? Is it you as District 1? Is it the Board of Supervisors? Is it the mayor?
When it comes to accountability with the nonprofits, the mayor's budget, and the Board of Supervisor, I think there needs to be a more transparency when it comes to our budget system. And we need to see how the dollar's coming in and how the dollar's coming out. So when you say who's accountable, we're all accountable. The Board of Supervisors, the mayor's office, and the nonprofits that run it. We're accountable for the transparency to tell back to our taxpayers how we're spending their money.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask another follow-up question to Marjan. You talk about diversity and you talk about the Salt Lake City model. What portion of that model in that program that you would bring to here in San Francisco?
We need to provide opportunities for shelter to all individuals experiencing homelessness. Now in Salt Lake City, the price of housing is much less. The production, rents, all of that is much less. Here in San Francisco, in addition to the issue of homelessness, we've seen a decades-long neglect around housing production, in particular affordable housing. And now that we are entering a period where our budgets are stretched, you know, I wish we can rely on the federal and state governments to give us money, but we can't. So we have to come up with more efficient ways to provide that housing in San Francisco.
Thank you. And I'm going to get into that question. You speak about affordable housing. To live in San Francisco, you're considered poor if you don't make over $150,000.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know many homeless people who are on the streets who could afford to live in what we define as affordable housing. So is that really the solution?
So what I'm talking about is one, move them into shelter beds, then transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, and then to get them on their feet to live on their own. And that includes 100% affordable housing, subsidized housing, right? And for people who don't qualify or get lucky in the affordable housing lottery, give them the opportunities to move into permanent housing if it's not permanent supportive housing. Because you're right, it's impossible to afford housing in San Francisco.
Thank you. And Amanda, my last follow-up question is to you. You cited Oakland and many other cities in their programs. Oakland has created shelters for the homeless. Where would you build these shelters? Would they be in District 1?
The tough shelters that I was referring to, wherever we can find open lots that are have access to good public streets, preferably public transportation, obviously, and there are lots around, some in the district and some outside the district. But we've got some really large lots that are available, especially down next to the ballpark. That parking lot A is huge and it's being unused, and it will be unused for a long time until we get the ballpark up and running, probably at least a year. We should use it.
Thank you very much, Amanda. The next question is mine. Is there a way to provide services only to folks from San Francisco, as opposed to providing unlimited services for anyone who chooses to come here from outside the area? The first question, that question goes to Veronica.
You know, I'm an immigrant to this country. So to say you only get services if you're from San Francisco, that's kind of tough for me. I think if you are in San Francisco and you are unhoused and we have a moral obligation to assist. While I think there's a different component where we can figure out where these individuals come from, and then we work with the other counties to assist us, that's a different conversation. But when it comes to services, I believe if you need healthcare and you're in City and County San Francisco, no matter your immigration status or your housing status, you should be provided the services.
Thank you. The same question goes to Amanda.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, is there a way to provide services only to folks from San Francisco, as opposed to providing unlimited services for anyone who chooses to come here from outside the area?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's a really tough question, because if they're going to be here and we're not providing them services, then their issues are going to be exacerbated, and they're ultimately going to cost our city a lot more in ambulance rides to the ER room and a number of different ways. There's got to be a way to disincentivize people from coming here and latching onto the services and the homes, you know, build it, they will come mentality. People will come. They did so when we opened up hotel rooms. I know 2 people personally that came and took a hotel room. But I think that we have to be humane and provide a certain level of services for folks. Try to steer them.
Thank you, Amanda. Same question goes to Connie.
I actually agree with Veronica. You know, we are a sanctuary city, and this is San Francisco values that we are going to provide supports and for those who are poor and need help. But at the same time, for the long-term vision, that what we need to see is a regional collaboration with other counties to provide supportive services and supportive housing, because the homeless crisis is a regional issue, in fact, national, as some of my fellow candidates have mentioned. So that is what we need to do in order for us to make sure that we are supportive to the entire population in San Francisco Bay Area. And that's what we need to do. It's a collaboration for supportive housing and services.
Thank you. Same question goes to Marjan.
So, you know, you can't penalize someone for trying to survive, right? And that's why people will come to San Francisco. And we really, you know, these are human beings, and some of them lived in homes just like you or I have in the past. And I think part of that means being more efficient. I think it means making this not just a policy priority, but a political priority. And it hasn't been for decades. So before we penalize people for not being from San Francisco, I think we need to look inwardly. We need to look at the leadership. We need strong, bold, independent leadership to ensure that we're serving these individuals and ultimately our entire population by making that transition into housing, into shelter, into a stable life, something that is attainable, because I don't think that's too much for any human being to ask.
Thank you. And Shervin, same question.
Yeah, once you're in San Francisco, it is our responsibility as San Francisco to take care of anybody who is homeless. And I don't think we should incentivize people to come here. But once they're here, they're our responsibility. We need to figure out how to get the services that they need to get them back on their feet.
Thank you very much. Marie, any follow-up questions to the candidates?
Not at this time, no. I'm going to move on to the next question. We'll start with Amanda. How would you propose we address open drug use in the Richmond district? What role should law enforcement play? That's Amanda.
Okay. Okay, so it's clearly illegal to be using drugs in open, as alcohol is as well, in open street activity. I think that the police do need to take some kind of action. I don't know if our district attorney is going to prosecute those kinds of cases. I think, again, it's going to be a citation and release, and those citations are being forgiven right now. So it's kind of an endless cycle or circle of events, which takes up a lot of police officers' time when they should and could be doing something else. I think it's a hot team issue, and I think that those folks on the hot team need to come around and control matters and possibly bring this stuff indoors.
Thank you. Next, same question, Connie.
I am a mom of a 7-year-old, and it is challenging. You know, if I were walking around with him and seeing that's happening, it's heartbreaking, and it's very also challenging to explain. So definitely it's not tolerable to have that. And what I would do, it's like what I have said previously, is that we really need to make sure that we have healthcare professionals, social worker, and a community outreach team out there to be able to really confront this issue. And safe injection sites may be actually a solution to this as well. So that's, I look forward to seeing that coming to take place in San Francisco and in the Richmond if necessary.
Thank you, Connie. Marjan.
So, you know, I agree. I think we're not going to arrest our way out of this homelessness issue. I think that, you know, looking at the sobering center, safe injection sites, you know, drug dealing is also an issue. Individuals who are dealing drugs oftentimes also suffer from the same mental health and addiction issues of the individuals using drugs. But it's not okay. Open air drug use is not okay. I think that there needs to be some
whether it's with social workers or a combination of mental health professionals to stop that from happening. That means more resources for the Richmond, and in a time of pretty severe budget cuts, that's going to be challenging. So I think this is an everyday focus and an everyday with metrics issue that the next supervisor needs to prioritize so that we can make progress on a daily basis.
Thank you. Sherman. Oh, sorry. Yes, Sherman.
So a lot of the solutions that we heard sound good, but the initial problem is how do we stop it from happening out on our street? And we can work a way around it, but the only way around it is through law enforcement. You cannot have drug dealing out on the street or drug using on the street. We have to get them into the system, not to incarcerate them, but get them into the system so that we can get them the treatment that they need. It is one method, one tool that city government can use to get people the help that they won't otherwise get. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Veronica, same question.
So I'm a mother of 2 kids, and you know, seeing that happen in our district, it's tough, and it's a really tough conversation to have with our children. And it's unsafe to go to the parks and see needles in our parks and tell our children don't play in that area. Absolutely not acceptable. But what I think I've understood with our unhoused population, it's not only a drug addiction issue, it's a mental health issue. So for me, bringing the police department to just arrest and take, not acceptable. These are individuals that need services. If it's a sobering center, a safe needle injection center, or really, you know, bringing resources into the Richmond district and expanding the mobile navigation centers to get these services, I think is a better humane approach than just, you know, calling SFPD. So again, I say call 311, not 911.
Thank you, Veronica. Ryan, do you have any follow-up questions on that?
I do. Thank you very much. You know, I'm going to go back to you, Veronica. You mentioned about expanding the safe injection sites. Saying if you build it, they will come. And so is there a fear if we create more services, more people will come to San Francisco because of those services?
I think that fear is very valid. And, you know, we've always said if you build it, they will come. But now we have a problem as they're on our streets already. They're on our sidewalks. They're in our parks. So how do we make it safe for our children to go to the park and play? How do we make it safe for our kids to go on a field trip at Golden Gate Park and not have someone at the park telling us don't play in this area because there might be needles? So I understand that fear is that we have to approach it in a humane way where we also protect our residents and especially our children from seeing needles or getting, you know, poked by a needle in the streets. So I understand that approach of if they build them, they will come. But I say if we don't build them, then what are we left with? How do we raise our children in a neighborhood if that is what we're seeing and we're not taking an approach to fix it?
Thank you. Next question is for Connie. Connie, is there a limit on how much money we should spend on the homeless situation? Is it $500 million, $1 billion, $2 billion? And is money really the answer?
No, I really believe that it's really about how we are spending it. And I think that my fellow candidates have talked about the transparency and accountability. And that is, I think, what we lack right now is the transparency and accountability of how we're spending the $12.5 billion of city budget that we currently have, even with the $1.7 billion deficits in the next 2 fiscal years, we're still left with a $10 billion city budget that we need to figure out how do we spend that efficiently. And that is truly the way I'm seeing the situation.
And I'm going to go to Marjan. You know, people, the residents of the Richmond district, don't always feel 311 works. What reforms would you make to the system so that it works?
So I think when we look at, talking about the Richmond in particular, right? Richmond district, we need an advocate. So when I hear these conversations tonight, there's a lot of talking about ideas. There's a lot of debating on the Board of Supervisors. And in the meantime, the issue of homelessness is getting worse, right? And 311 is stretched. I don't think we have streamlined our systems enough around mental health and social work to really serve this population. We got to get out there and do things, and we need to speak up when we're not getting the services that we need. And that's what our supervisor can do for this neighborhood. Squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's how we have to work on this in the Richmond.
Yes, and Marjan, I'm going to follow up to your response. You mentioned, we need to do things. Please be specific as we go through.
For example, okay, I'm really frustrated like all of you are. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I am very frustrated by this issue. But the supervisor's office, right, things aren't working in this city. And we're seeing the same people on the street day after day not getting help. I would say, we read this about Supervisor Mandelman the other week. Keep a list of all the homeless individuals in your neighborhood and make sure that you know what's happening with them on a weekly, if not daily basis, and ensure that something's moving. We just got to do something because all these things are conceptual, right? And I'm tired of waiting. I mean, people are dying in the streets, and it's a failure of our government, and we're failing our residents, and we're failing the individuals experiencing homelessness.
Amanda,
Yep.
This goes to you. And please, I'm going to ask everyone to be specific. Buzzwords of frustration and we don't like it, it's unsightly. Those are not solutions. This forum here today is for you guys to express what your solutions are. So Amanda, what is your specific solution to this problem?
And can you repeat the problem, please?
Yes. How would you propose we address open drug use in the Richmond district? Oops, sorry.
So this is a follow-up question to the question I just answered?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I said, I don't think it's a police-oriented solution. I think we need to get the hot team out there. And I think the hot team needs to intervene. Those needles shouldn't be out. Those people shouldn't be doing that on the street. And the hot team needs to come and intervene and tell the folks that they can't do that there anymore. And we likely will need to start having some kind of place where we can bring people indoors to do drugs. It's not acceptable to do drugs on the street. I just don't think the district attorney is going to do any type of prosecution, even if the police arrest them.
Yes. And my last follow-up goes to you, Sherman. Yep. About 15 years ago, the city implemented a policy where we passed out free needles to lower the transmission of HIV. Do you believe that we should continue that policy if people are openly shooting drugs in District 1?
Okay. So the needle exchange program is a good program, okay, because it prevents disease from spreading in the community. However, giving needles out without collecting the needles back doesn't really help. So if we're giving out needles, we're giving out 10 needles, we should get them back on a one-to-one basis when they come to get the needles. Otherwise, there's no incentive to kind of bring those needles back and they end up on the streets, in our parks. That's not acceptable.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to question number 6. And this is my question. The city spends more than $300 million a year on the homeless issue, but the problem has only gotten worse. The current estimate is that the city will have a $1.7 billion deficit due to COVID-19. With declining revenues, what is your plan to close the gap? And please, let's be specific. And first question that goes to Connie.
So we haven't had a chance to really talk about this. And I think one of the issue that I want to talk about it in 3 different parts, but then the first one is, one of the ways to really immediately move some of the housed San Franciscans into a situation where they can be safely housed, and especially during the pandemic and quarantine, is the hotel, moving them into a hotel. In fact, Governor Newsom has actually allocated $700 million to allow counties to acquire hotel rooms. And so what I see right now is that we can immediately to do that and make sure that our homeless population can be housed. And then another one is, if I could squeeze this in, is that, this county, 6 counties, we have been lockstep and tackled this pandemic. We should use the very same approach to tackle the homeless issue as the 6 counties together and tackle that in the same manner with the homeless population in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Marjan, same question. Please be very specific. $1.1 billion deficit. How do you solve the problem?
So I think with regard to the $300 million, as I mentioned earlier, I'm all for an audit of how that money's spent. I'm all for increased transparency in those city contracts. I think in this conversation around re-envisioning and reimagining, law enforcement as well as social services, we need to make sure that we're streamlining what services different city employees are providing to individuals experiencing homelessness. I do think, on the hotel rooms, we've acquired about 4,000 hotel rooms the city has so far. 2,000 individuals experiencing homelessness have been moved into those hotel rooms. And as we've mentioned before, it's a long process because and it can't be fast enough because these individuals need help and they need a team of people helping them. So I think in a budget constrained year, we'll need to streamline those processes and take a really hands-on approach to how we serve individuals experiencing homelessness.
Thank you. Same question to Sherman.
Yeah. So, the hotel situation, although there is money right now, that money is going to dry up as we move forward. So we need to figure out how we're going to do this for the long term. It does no good putting people in a hotel short term and then in a couple of months or a year, they're back out. We need to have a long-term solution. I think the city needs to run it rather than outsourcing a lot of these services. And I think the first thing to do is to have a place or a couple of places where we can have all these people be so that we can assess what they need to do. Their own place, but on city property so that we can figure out what services we can provide to them to get them back on their feet.
Thank you. Next question goes to Veronica.
It's going to be a couple years of tough times, and we all know it. And there is a deficit, and we're going to see 10, 15% cuts across the board. But it can't be on the backs, of our working class. We have to provide the services here in the city and county of San Francisco. So how do we do it? I think a lot of the candidates have mentioned it. First of all, we need transparency and accountability how we are spending our money. But second of all, we need to start working on the homelessness issue. It's not a San Francisco issue. It's a national crisis. And we need to start having that conversation at the federal and state level of the urgency San Francisco is having, along with Santa Clara County, Alameda, Contra Costa, and LA County, who has a huge unhoused population, is also dealing with similar issues San Francisco is. So we really need to start looking at when we're dealing with the unhoused population and when it comes to their budgetary issues, we need the support of our state and federal government to appropriate funds to really provide these services that are desperately needed in our city.
Thank you, Veronica. And last, Amanda.
Yeah, so I read a statistic or a number that it costs for all these hotel rooms about $53 million a month to house San Francisco homeless people. And if we were to make that effort, and the governor is going to provide us $700 million, we are going to shoot through that in 6 months. Well, if we use half of it, we'd shoot through it in 6 months. And that's just not realistic. We're going to still be left with a deficit and the inability to provide for these folks and the inability to pay for the hotel room. So I just think that that's throwing good money after bad. I do think we need to really fortify the Homeward Bound program. We need to make a connection with the folks on the other end and stick with it. There's a statistic that said that San Francisco, I think out of like 100 cases, we connect with people on the other end out of every 2 cases, which is ridiculous. We really should be connecting people with Social Security income and a house and a family in rehab or whatever it is on the other side if they're wanting to go home. And I just actually spoke with a homeless gal last night, and she wanted to be able to return to the Sacramento area to her family and was unable to because she couldn't get a Homeward Bound ticket. It's really too bad.
Thank you very much. And I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we will no longer have follow-up questions. But what I will ask is make sure we hear the question and be very specific to the answer that you provide. Thank you. And Marie.
Thank you so much, Ryan. The candidates, each of you has said we need to provide more mental health and addiction programs. If you support strengthening these, please explain in detail what these programs are, how they work, and how we can leverage them to reduce homelessness in the Richmond district specifically. Marjan.
I think the 2 things, right? Sobering centers and safe injection sites, right? I think looking at the environment we're in right now, where we're still in the midst of a pandemic, and we're still facing challenges around being in close proximity with each other. I mean, conceptually, a sobering center like the one at 180 Jones that was planned to be open is a place where someone who is experiencing a high, is drunk or what have you, can go there and get services to sober up. With safe injection sites, that I know is a really, tough topic for people to talk about. It's been successful in Vancouver, and with this federal administration, it's going to be very difficult to get that done. So all these issues, oh, my time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherman.
Yeah, could you read the question? I wasn't quite sure I understand what you're asking.
Each of you has said that we need to provide more mental health and addiction programs. If you support strengthening these, please explain in detail what these programs are, how they work, and how we can leverage them to reduce homelessness in the Richmond district.
Yeah, so we do need to have those services. It is a lot cheaper to spend the money up front on those services and make sure that they get treatment for alcohol or drug abuse. It's less expensive to spend the money up front than to have them out on the street and using drugs on the street or alcohol, and then we having to take them in an ambulance to the hospital every single time that they have an issue. We need to get ahead of it. We need to say, hey, look, we're going to give you the help you need. We're going to spend the money on the services that you need, and you're going to make you avail yourself of those services.
Thank you. Veronica.
So I think if we want to make a dent when it comes to that issues, chronic homelessness prevention, and I go back to the 64 under age 25 unhoused youth in the Richmond district. Homelessness, I haven't lived it, but when you're homeless, you don't go in homeless being needing services and needing drugs and alcohol. It's kind of an issue of what happens when you're homeless. So we need to prevent it. And I go back to educating our youth and helping, especially our foster care children. Once they turn 21, they're off on their own, helping them and working with the state to really expand the age to 25. There's a current bill right now to extend it to 25. So we get these services for these youth not to become homeless. So we don't see chronic homelessness in San Francisco.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you. Amanda?
So there are quite a few really good rehabilitation services here in the city that actually work for folks with dual diagnosis. And one that I work really close with my clients is Ashbury House. Usually it's a house for women. It's usually women who have both mental health and substance abuse. That model is amazing, and we should replicate that. They also allow for children to come into that facility once the parent stabilizes. How they work, they allow for folks to stabilize, they allow for people to get to the root of the problems, and they allow for people to get out of their situation, so they're avoiding the triggers that would necessarily cause them to have more mental health breakdowns or go back to substance abuse. And I would also suggest that we pair up with people outside of San Francisco for these services, because we can't hire enough people to build here. We just can't. We can't staff these places.
Thank you, Amanda. Connie?
So when I talk about individualized approach, what I really mean is that, the key part of this outreach is intake process. It means that we need a team of social worker, healthcare professional, and community partners that will approach these individuals to take them through an intake process to kind of see what are their needs and assess their needs and be able to identify what kind of issues that they're really having and draw it down so that we can actually locate it. Is it mental hospital? Is it safe injection site? Is it navigation center or long-term supportive housing, education or job training, or meal services? So the intake process is actually really the key, and that we should invest in that so that we know what the problem is, and then we can actually know what the solution can be for this individual to do a long-term solution for them.
Thank you. And Ryan, you have the next question.
Yes. Why do you think Supervisor Stefani has been successful in addressing encampments in her district, but Supervisor Fear has not.
Sherman, you're up.
Thank you, Marie.
Well, I think part of that is, for me, I think for me, it's more about enforcement. You know, if we say that it's okay to have camps on the sidewalk, well, that's what people are going to do. And so I think we have to say, you know, we're not going to allow that anymore on our streets, and then give people a real alternative to being out on the street. But it really comes down to the supervisor in that neighborhood, if they're going to, or if they're going to be okay with that, or they're going to say that we can't allow this for our neighborhood. For me, that's the difference.
Thank you. Veronica, same question.
We're talking about two very different districts. To say why one works and the other doesn't is unfair. While homelessness is one city issue, I think our districts are so different. The reality is here in the Richmond district, we just don't have space. We don't have a large venue where we can house our unhoused and be like, this is your permanent housing. I think in the Richmond district, because we're so compact, it really needs to be not only tailored to our community, but also addressing the needs of the community. And the reality is we lack services in the outer Richmond and the Richmond district in general. Even when it comes to the unhoused populations, we're last on the list to get these services. So to say one works and one the other in various districts, it's because the resources are divided very differently.
Thank you. I'm going to reread the question. Why do you think Supervisor Stefani has been successful in addressing encampments in her district, but Supervisor Fear has not? Amanda.
So I watched the town hall that Sandra Lee Fewer put on a couple weeks ago on a Saturday morning, and Chief Scott came on and discussed this very issue. One of the things I read on a Twitter feed prior to that was that Supervisor Stefani showed up every single day at the site and every single day called the police. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think that she kind of went knocking on the door. And then Chief Scott said that what he did is he went there in the middle of the day, and since the tents were abandoned, they're allowed at that point to scoop up the tents, bag them, tag them, and take them away. And that's how that encampment evaporated.
Thank you, Amanda. Same question goes to Connie.
You know, we've seen this happen during Super Bowl last time around, that, you know, there's a clean sweep, you know, and encampments were gone, and guess where they went? They went to the South Market community. And that is the reality of homelessness in our city for the last decade and then some, is the squeezing toothpaste situation. They maybe disappear, but certainly I hope the individuals that were in Supervisor Stephanie's district really actually find shelter and long-term homes in that situation. But I don't know, and I don't know for sure. But what I really think that is happening when you see something like that, homeless suites all around the city, it's just squeezing toothpaste, moving one encampment to another neighborhood or to down the block. And that's all there is right now.
Thank you. Marjan.
I can't speak to what Supervisor Stephanie did or, you know, any motivations or around what Supervisor Fewer is doing. But what I can speak to is what I said earlier, in that our district supervisor needs to be an advocate, not just for residents, but individuals experiencing homelessness. And that means the daily top priority, right? Given the parameters we're working in, given this pandemic, given budget cuts, given, you know, any type of restrictions, and the fact that people there aren't enough shelter beds or not enough hotel rooms, right? We must keep the foot on the gas on this and be present. You know, Amanda, when you mentioned if Supervisor Stephanie was going to encampments every day, then that's what we need to do as well. I mean, we need to shine a light on this issue and continue to bring it up. And it's not just a seasonal thing.
Thank you. Question number 9, back to you, Marie. And we are down to our last 2 full questions.
Thank you so much, Ryan. You know, the question we have here focuses on the encampments in the Richmond district. But I'm seeing some other questions coming up, and I am going to actually just depart from the list we have of questions and ask if each of the candidates can share. We've heard a lot about wanting to take care of everyone. It doesn't matter if they're from San Francisco or not, and yet we're about to enter a massive recession. And even if it's not a massive recession, you know, we've had the answer that no, it shouldn't be $1 billion. It shouldn't be $2 billion. How do we cut costs here? What are we going to do to ensure that we have the most cost-effective services? And if we're willing to take anyone from anywhere, how do we keep this from getting out of control? And who is expected to pay for this? And we'll start with Veronica.
You know, going back, if you're not from San Francisco, you don't get services is not the way to go. That's not been San Francisco's value. There's a reason why we're saying San Francisco. But when it comes to our budget, yes, we're entering a deficit and we are going to see cuts across the board and everyone is going to hurt. So how do we fix a deficit while trying to provide services? Well, the fact is we're not going to be able to provide all the services we provided 12 weeks ago. It's not feasible. But what needs to be done is have a conversation with the other counties, have a conversation at the federal and state level when it comes to homelessness and make this a national crisis. There is money at the federal level. If it requires creating a grant writing agency at the city and county in San Francisco, if it requires me to start writing grants, we need to start finding funding. Now, should it be on the backs of San Francisco residents? No. But is it our responsibility as San Franciscans to help those who are here? Yes. Thank
you, Veronica. Amanda.
You know, to employ a public health nurse or a psych nurse is about $250,000 a year. And if we need to hire 100, we're talking millions of dollars just for that group of folk. We cannot keep throwing money at this and expect to bail out of it. We just don't have the money. And the invitation to bring people here for services, because we've got an excellent methadone program, drugs are available on the streets, et cetera, et cetera. We have to create boundaries. We have to get the drug dealers off the street, and then we have to provide for the people that we have here now and limit those services that we can provide to other people and let it be known that we cannot just be an open bank. We can't, we don't have the money, and this will go on in perpetuity. We just can't manage it.
Thank you, Amanda. Connie.
I have kind of briefly mentioned this in the last couple rounds. Again, homelessness, homeless crisis is a public health crisis, and that we could treat it as such, and that we have done this with the pandemic, and we can do this again too, and continue to do this with other counties in collaboration, and to tackle these issues with homelessness, because we know that it's not just impacting us, it impacts the entire Bay Area. Other counties share the pain, and let's put our partnership together and solve this together as 6 counties or 9 counties in the entire Bay Area. And that, be it land, be it funding and resources, that is how we do that. The governor has shown that, you know, if the West Coast have gathered together to kind of advocate for the West Coast, you know, to open up together, you know, unity is our power and strength. So that's how I see we can tackle this issue during the budget crisis.
Thank you. Marjan.
So I think it's important to remember this did not happen overnight. It happened over decades of neglect, decades of not having the conversations and the advocacy, and it's definitely not going to get better overnight. And, you know, truthfully, I think that we're going to see some things get worse in our neighborhood, citywide, and in the region until there is more advocacy, political will, and leadership around this issue. And I mean, just specifically, right? It's yes, we need more funding. We need to look at this in a more holistic way in the immediate short term, right? We could talk about taxes, we could talk about corporations, we could talk about banding together with other counties. But I think, to Veronica's point, talking about grants and other public-private partnerships to stop the bleeding that's happening now so that we can move forward with more long-term sound policies around housing and mental health and substance use treatment.
Thank you, Marjan. And Sherman.
Yeah. So, it sounds good to say, well, we're going to pick and choose who we provide services to, okay? But we have to be realistic. We're going to be bound by what the courts say. And the courts are going to say that, you know what, if they're in our city, we have to provide services to them. But how we provide those services is certainly something that our supervisor and can look into. And one of those things is, how do we use the resources that we currently have and the reduced services that we'll have going forward more effectively to help the people that need help right now. So that might be curtailing some of the more extravagant stuff that we do and just limited to the really basic stuff right now, getting them off the street, getting them into a place that is sheltered and that is safe first, and then see what resources are left after that, and then distribute them evenly to take care of the people that that need services after we get them off the street.
Thank you, Sherman. And it's back to you, Ryan.
Thank you. And this is the last question of this section. Do you believe that an individual has the right to live on the street, and why? And that goes to Amanda.
I don't think you have the right to live on the street. The public sidewalk is for the public. It's not for the individual. There's no absolute right, but you have a right to be in the city. And that's a constitutional right. The right to travel is embedded in our amendments. So the right, and we have modified that and restricted that by having the sit and lie laws and some other laws that we've implemented over the years that are found in our municipal codes and our police code. But those codes are not enforced.
Thank you. Same question to Connie.
Definitely a person has the right to be in our public space. But I think what you're trying to ask is that, being homeless and being on the street, is that a right? And what I'm saying is that being homeless is not a crime, and that we have seen, the amendments to administrative codes or criminal codes, and it doesn't help with the homeless situation. And again, like I said earlier, to solve the homeless problem is to prevent it from happening from first place, but also to really reform the way that we care for our own in-house San Franciscans, and is to improve the intake process to provide a professional team to conduct those individualized approach outreach.
Thank you. Same question goes to Marjan.
We can't criminalize homelessness. If an individual says that they prefer or would like to be homeless, I think that individual needs help. And that's where our mental health and behavioral health representatives come in. I don't believe that anyone wants to be living on the street, exposing themselves to the elements and to dangers out on the street. It's not a humane way to live. And I think we need to assist those people into a more humane home environment.
Thank you. Same question to Sherman.
No, you don't have a right to live out on the street. However, the courts have said that unless we have a place for them to go, we can't enforce that to keep the sidewalks clear. So I hate to go back to the same thing I keep going back to, but it's the first priority must be to get a place for them to be so that they are not on the sidewalk. That has to be the number one priority. Before we address any of the other issues, that has to be the primary concern, because that's what the courts have said, that you have to have a place for them to go if you're going to tell them they can't be on the sidewalk.
Thank you, Sherman. And this is the last question. Same question goes to you, Veronica.
Being unhoused is it's not a crime. Being unhoused sometimes means you're unhoused because you have 3 jobs and still can't afford to live here in the city and county of San Francisco. So do they have a right to be on the sidewalk? Well, where else do they go? If we don't have a place for them to go, if we don't have the services to provide them to where they should go. So again, being unhoused, it's not a crime. Is it a moral obligation for us as candidates and elected officials to really work on a solution? Yes, it is. So again, I don't want to infringe on anyone's right to be on the sidewalk or infringe any children from safely walking on the sidewalk, but this is the reality. They're also our residents. They're also our, our neighbors here in District 1.
Thank you. Marie?
Great, thank you. And I realize we are coming to the end of our time here. We thought of a creative thing that we wanted to do, but you know what? I don't think we have time because I know there are people who have to leave at 8. So let's just go through the yes, no's, and I think we should be able to spit these out. So Ryan, do you want to ask the first question?
Yeah. So remember, this is just a simple yes or no answer. Should Richmond residents feel guilty or shameful for waiting to reduce the growing epidemic of homelessness in the Richmond district? Veronica?
No, we shouldn't.
Amanda?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Did you say waiting?
Should Richmond residents feel guilty or shameful for wanting to reduce the growing epidemic of homelessness in the Richmond district?
No.
No. Connie?
No, absolutely not.
Marjan?
No.
And Sherman? Sure, you're on mute, Sherman.
No.
Good, thank you.
Okay, let's everybody unmute because we're going to try to get through this really quick. Would you support a city policy that bans panhandling? Amanda?
Yes.
Connie?
Yes.
Marjan?
Yes.
Sherman?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Ryan?
Next question. Should it be the policy of the city to move the homeless from the streets of San Francisco to vacant parking lots or empty buildings? We'll start off with Connie.
We can do better.
Yes or no, please?
We can do better. I think that's a lot more complicated.
Okay, so that's a non-answer. Marjan?
In addition to other things, yes. I mean,
Sherman?
Yes.
Veronica?
That's one of many, so yes.
And Amanda?
Yes.
Thank you. Marie?
Do you feel a resident should have to live with homeless individuals camped in front of their home, potentially with garbage strewn about? Marjan?
well, no. But it's a
Sherman?
bigger issue.
Sherman?
No.
Veronica?
No.
Amanda?
No.
Connie?
No.
Question number 16. Do you feel homeless individuals who blatantly disregard laws should be cited? Sherman?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Amanda?
No.
Connie?
No.
And Marjan?
Yes.
Thank you. Marie?
Do you think we should revise and or streamline the way citations are enforced such that violations do not bog down our court system? Veronica?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You cut
Do you
off.
think we should revise or streamline the way citations are enforced so that violations do not bog down the court system?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes, that's the point.
Connie?
Sure, efficiency is good.
Marjan?
Yes.
Sherman?
Yes.
Ryan?
Right. Do you feel we should consider more centralized encampments in less inhabited, non-residential locations? Veronica?
No.
Sherman?
Yes.
Marjan,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? More
Yeah.
centralized encampments and instead of,
do you feel we should consider more centralized encampments and in less inhabited non-residential locations?
for consideration, sure. Yes, to consider.
John, Connie,
If you're saying safe camping sites is an option, then yes.
Sherman.
Wait, we're on Amanda.
Oh, I'm sorry, Amanda.
Yes.
Okay. Should the homeless be allowed to camp in Greenbelt areas? Park Presidio Boulevard, Mountain Lake Park, Golden Gate Park. Marjan.
No.
Sherman.
Nope.
Veronica.
No.
Amanda.
No.
Connie.
If city's law allows,
Yes or no?
if city's laws allow, it's
Thank you. Number 20. Do you believe, as recommended by Senator Feinstein, the Cow Palace or other areas like Treasure Island should be considered as designated safe sleeping sites? Sherman,
Yes.
Veronica,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Connie,
sure.
and Marjan.
Yes, considered, yes.
Okay. Do you feel open drug use should be cited on the streets of our district? Connie.
No.
Marjan.
Wait, when you say cited, like, I mean, we need to enforce, dealing and open air drug use, but just the stream, I'm sorry. I mean, I guess, yes, but we need to streamline.
Sherman.
Yes.
Veronica.
Yes.
Amanda.
No.
Thank you. And the last question, and I hope we get a unanimous yes to this question. If you become our supervisor, are you committed to meeting with SOAR quarterly to review progress and discuss constructive approaches that address these issues? All at once, say yes.
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 Thank you. Thank you. We wanted to say thank you very much for joining in this forum. Obviously, homeless issues is a very important issue that we have in District 1 and citywide. We look forward to hearing from you in the future. Your leadership and your dedication will go a long way in making District 1 a much better place. So thank you very much, everyone. And it is 8:03.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the attendees. Really, really great to have you. And your questions have been phenomenal. Keep them coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye, folks.